One of the big topics is the supply chain, right? When it comes to Kubernetes security.
Is it plural? Is Kubernetes plural?
I believe it's singular. At least I refer to it as a singular term, being a good product manager, a good business savvy. So I think it's been exciting to carry that to the next level.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome back to Cybersecurity Stand Up. I'm your host, Bronwyn Hudson, and today I'm joined by another Uptycs superstar. I've got Abhinav with me. Abhinav, can you tell the people a little bit about what you do here at Uptycs and maybe how you got to where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm the director of product here at Uptycs, leading the containers and Kubernetes security front. So everything when it comes to Kubernetes security posture management, runtime container security, shift left, all those kinds of things. And I got here, I started my journey as a software engineer originally. I was at VMware for 5 years. In between, I pursued my MBA at Kellogg and was happening to intern at Uptycs last year, and I joined a few months ago. In between, I decided to build some Kubernetes expertise and was at a startup called Rafe, where it was a Kubernetes operations platform, was doing a lot of the developer self-service capabilities and was leading that on the product management side. And yeah, super excited to be here, and there's so much opportunity, and really, really happy to chat with you today.
Awesome. Extremely cool. I, first of all, had no idea you had your MBA. That's such a flex. Love that. And really cool that you came up in software as well. I mean, from my perspective, like Kubernetes hasn't really been around for that long. So it's cool that you have actually been sort of involved in getting expertise in that area for a while now.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see, just having started my career in cloud and have seen it shape up, from the VMware days, hybrid, just running your, normal virtual machines to now seeing the adoption of Kubernetes. When I was at VMware, Kubernetes, when it came up, it was like, just what is this thing and is it going to take off? And now we see not just open source, in terms of enterprises just trying and tinkering with it, but actually using it for real-time production applications and at scale. And that's been very cool to witness.
Definitely. If you had to, I mean, obviously we've got a lot of Kubernetes offerings sort of within Uptycs, and we've got some really cool stuff that we do. But what do you think the future of Kubernetes security looks like?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think it boils down to a couple of fronts, right? I think firstly, one of the big topics is the supply chain, right? When it comes to Kubernetes security, you see there was a Gartner stat, I believe it was around 85% of organizations are going to embrace a developer self-service model. That means developers are pushing more and more code. It's very DevOps. A lot of enterprises are becoming DevOps friendly, and they're using a lot of DevOps tooling, whether it's GitHub Actions, your pipelines, container registries. And what happens is when you have a lot of those DevOps toolings, it's great so you can push more applications, but that means your entire DevOps pipeline could be more vulnerable because there's more kind of your increased attack surface. And that's where enterprises are looking for deep, visibility and security across that entire software development lifecycle or supply chain. That was actually, I was reading a stat. It was like it was a Red Hat Kubernetes security survey, a fantastic read if you haven't read it. But they cited that in their research, 35% of the enterprises and respondents were deeply troubled by supply chain security and had some supply chain security issue. And so having that full traceability, starting from the runtime and being able to shift left, and that's something, of course, we have a lot of the CI scanning and image security functionality today, but something that we're starting to build out even more. So around image traceability, around being able to really correlate when a vulnerability took place in terms of your images and runtime, and being able to trace that back to the developer build and laptop and being able to shift up, like we say, is one of the key things we're looking into. So I would say that's one of the big fronts, supply chain. Another thing is just, misconfigurations in Kubernetes is more prevalent, right? Because you look, actually, just to explain it to those who may be new to Kubernetes, a lot of the checks are and yes, a lot of the policies and configurations on a cluster are actually done via these YAML files. So it's literally like code that you're
Yeah.
writing, and you'll check them into your cluster. So you can imagine when I'm coding or writing something in, a new language, there's obviously room for error, right? But those misconfigurations could be massive in terms of leading to security holes. Similarly, Kubernetes comes with a lot of defaults that are very developer friendly, but in terms of enterprise security, they can lead to misconfigurations or even attacks like lateral movement attacks if not locked down properly. So, for example, default service accounts, right? Default service accounts, for example, is something that we check in our Uptycs platform and
Mhm.
have like this entire access control monitor to check it, because if somebody attacks that service account and that has access to a vulnerable pod, then that can infiltrate the rest of the cluster, right? So those are misconfigurations. There was a stat that I think around 40% were concerned in that survey around ransomware attacks that were tied to misconfigurations. So that's something that's very big. And I think finally the third concern is just the scale, right? And the what we call the short-lived nature of these container assets. Like containers, right? Unlike your virtual machines, they're spun up, they're spun down, and Kubernetes it's an orchestration engine. So it means there's constantly changes going on in the cluster. And so for SecOps teams and developers to have that right level of visibility where they're not looking at noise, but able to prioritize like what is most important for their
Right.
specific assets, and to be able to have a developer friendly workflow where developers are looking at their specific security concerns so they can resolve the vulnerabilities, malwares, and sensitive data is key. So those, I know that was a little bit long winded,
That
but
was
those are the kind
great.
of three big things I see. Yeah.
Fascinating forecasting. I have a question about essentially points 1 and 2. And I like that you sort of referenced some stats because that gives us a little bit of a wider perspective on like who's thinking about these things, who's concerned. And my question is like, do any of those stats seem low to you? Like this idea that, 35% of people are concerned about or yeah, I mean, of respondents really are concerned about supply chain and maybe like 40% concerned about ransomware. Like, do those seem low to you? Should more people be concerned? Like, what's the vibe there?
Yeah. So I think it's a combination of two things. I think firstly, Kubernetes adoption, right? It's actually we're at and our CEO likes to call it use the Gartner terms. It's like there's I think it was called like the trough of disillusionment and then the peak of adoption, kind of that
Yes.
Gartner hype cycle curve, right? And so we're on our way to, and we're right now in a fascinating time where it's similar to at my previous company where we see a lot of enterprises now starting to embrace that Kubernetes at scale. And
Uh-huh.
so that means two things, right? A, they're kind of solving for the DevOps and operational piece of it. And in that, they're going to have different security concerns, which goes to my second point, where for some customers, it may be around establishing a vulnerability management program. For some other customers, it may be about compliance reporting. And I think you're going to start to see the stats start to converge in the next couple of years. But right now, it's interesting to see kind of these different buckets of concerns depending on the organization you're in and the industry you're in. And that's what we see with customers as well.
Gotcha. You're also I can hear in your responses these fascinating elements of maybe what actually is a combination of excellent software engineering and like business savviness because there are a lot of folks who maybe don't who still don't really know what Kubernetes are. Actually, first question,
Yeah.
is it plural? Is Kubernetes plural?
I believe it's singular. At least I
Okay.
refer to it as a singular term. There was, I think you had an interesting nugget, right, on what how the K8 part of it came, right?
Love that trivia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Numeronym and it's K8s because there's 8 letters. I love that. But I guess I just realized in that moment that it's like, is it Kubernetes is or Kubernetes are? Because both feel kind of good.
They're both good. Yeah, I do. I think typically we see Kubernetes is, and then Kubernetes clusters are, is what I've seen. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
So off the back of that, I'm kind of thinking about these. Often I feel like there are several populations who are talking about the same tech. There's the people who are involved with building it, writing the code, this kind of back end material. And there's folks like me who are more in the soft skills marketing, bringing it to the public awareness kind of eye. Can you
Mhm.
speak to that split? Like, do you think, because I'm kind of the opinion these days that it's a little bit of a false dichotomy that, that you're not
Mhm.
technical if you don't know how to code. But from your perspective, like, does that split exist? How do we bridge that gap?
I think in some ways it exists, in some ways it does. And I'll talk a little bit about the split, right? So the split, firstly, I think like from a contribution point of view, I think that's where we see a little bit more splits, especially in, CNCF and open source, right? There's,
Sure.
you see software engineers and like you see such great projects, right? Like Cilium and Backstage. So these are so, for example, Cilium does network security. Backstage is a developer self-service platform. That stat that
Okay.
I mentioned to you. A lot of enterprises are able to cater faster to their developers because of platforms like Backstage.
Okay, cool.
And so those are typically developer driven or engineering driven projects, but it's interesting. You're starting to see this converge where enterprises are starting, like from a marketing and go to market point of view, they're starting to talk about these projects in terms of their marketing, right? And I think
Totally.
from the Kubernetes point of view, I see more. I actually there might be a little bit of a split, but I see more convergence than before because these developer projects are starting to be evangelized into different enterprise offerings and also shared with the community. And that's where, from a go to market point of view, being able to talk about these efforts, being able to establish the right partnerships, being able to use these projects. So, for example, in Uptycs today, we use OPA Gatekeeper, which is it's open source, but we use it because it adds so much value. And from a go-to-market messaging, we talk about that because that is something that the community cares about. And so, I think we're starting to see these converge a lot on the Kubernetes front.
That seems to be, from my perspective, a very positive thing, right? That there's more understanding and sort of more clear recognition of the tools that developers are really using and reliant on. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and what's really cool is like, you go to these conferences like KubeCon and before it was very like, okay, very tech, very, heavy. And now you're starting to see this convergence of, you still have your technical sessions, but there's so much go-to-market traction and activity in terms of promoting all the great work that's going on in the Kubernetes front. And whether it's security or developer self-service platforms, and that's really exciting.
I'm wondering from a sort of a more personal note for you as someone who has this master's in business, like are your perspectives, it seems like you have the perfect perspective on an event like that and to see these different perspectives kind of coming together.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting journey. Like when I did my undergrad, I was computer engineering, went into VMware software, then wanting to kind of pursue the business major, but I didn't know initially, what I was going to do. So I thought I'd maybe do strategy consulting, try some of those fronts. But then I realized like my passion is in cloud, but I could take it to a different level by having more go-to-market awareness, understanding things like pricing and finance, being able to sell, right? I think sales is such a big part of being, a good product manager, a good business savvy. So I think it's been exciting to carry that to the next level and to be able to really be more strategic in the work I'm doing, investing in different projects, really kind of shaping how, for a company like Uptycs, who there's so much opportunity to be able to shift up, I guess, shape the next wave of container and Kubernetes security. Using that toolkit has been exciting. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love that because I feel like it's you're like the perfect person to kind of talk about those intersections of the actual tech, the hardcore stuff, but then also knowing what is actually important to the people who are leading other companies who are interested in buying the tech, because things like compliance and price like aren't dirty words, right? They're like necessary parts of this project to secure the future that we're all on. So I love that. It's a great perspective. I have another career question, kind of in the same vein, but if you, because you have like this, you've come up so fast. If you could go back 5 years, 10 years, and tell yourself something either about your career or your personal life or whatever it was, what would you tell yourself?
That's a good question. I think if I had to go 5 or 10 years back, I would say one thing I wish, or not like, just I think something that I would tell people who are young in their careers is to
Yeah.
read a lot, right? Choose interesting things to read. It doesn't have to be cloud, or it doesn't have to be like, it can be like maybe another pillar of technology like AI, or maybe it could be even like fiction, nonfiction. I think like just being more worldly. I think, and as a product manager, is interesting because you interact with customers on a lot, right? But to be able to empathize with the challenges they have to go through, they're not just a customer for you. They have their own business to run, their own products to sell. And I think when you can kind of really cater to sort of their pain points, and do as a product manager, CS, whatever, like offer your resources to help them in the best way possible so that their business succeeds and that they succeed on a personal level, I think it adds a lot of value. And I think reading is something I want to do more of, but it adds I think it just makes us all better. So
I fully agree with you. And my background is kind of in a lot of humanities stuff,
mhm.
history and literature and that kind of thing. And I genuinely was thinking about this the other day that, I've learned so much about people by reading fiction. Like if you read
Mhm.
Tolstoy, you're going to learn a lot about human psychology. And on one of our previous
Mhm.
episodes, was talking with Kevin Page, and like such a good example of someone who has a real deep and pretty impressive understanding of how humans behave and like why, which I
Yeah.
think has made him like a much better educator and communicator because he's able to
Yeah.
understand like all these incentives and different directions folks are coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that, and that's such a big focus in business school too, right? Just the making the like connections, being able to your body language, these kinds of things, everything, all of those facets stand out. So wholeheartely agree with you there.
It's really cool. I also didn't really know you kind of learned about that in business school. I don't really know what I thought business school was, but that's a cool aspect of it. I
Yeah,
love
it's
that.
interesting because they'll have your core classes like marketing and strategy and stuff, but these days there's so many classes on psychology and how to story tell. Like I think my favorite class from Kellogg was an entrepreneurial selling class where we learned how to tell stories to customers and sell and be really good at like getting customers on that journey, right?
Yeah.
And simple things like storytelling go such a long way. So yeah. Yeah.
Completely. Yeah. Like we think of storytelling
Yeah.
as this, yeah, like a simple framework, but how do you get good at it? How do you learn how to tell a story? That's totally a skill that you have to learn as well. Same kind of vibe. When we're talking about connecting with people, we're talking about understanding human behavior, we're talking about how it all like works together. What's something that you feel like people aren't talking about enough that should be at the forefront of our conversations?
Yeah, I would say one topic that doesn't get enough attention, I feel, is honestly, we talk a lot about security, visibility and everything. I think operationalization still doesn't get
Mm,
enough attention. It's interesting. We have things like Jira ticketing and those kinds of things, but understanding like when we have those things, you have to also understand like, for example, how does a given enterprise operate their Jira so you can cater almost work backwards from sort of their
mm.
processes. That's something we're starting to notice as a company, right? Just how do you make sure you're able to fit into not just the organizational structure but their day-to-day processes and what works well and what's not. And I think from a security point of view, that's I think going to be another center of attention, especially for Kubernetes where things are moving so fast that you need the ability to really cater into those DevSecOps workflows more than ever before. And I think that's where we're, as a company, we're with the supply chain and the shift left capabilities, trying to really focus on not just having DevSecOps functionality, but being able to operationalize it for any type of enterprise, depending on how they operate. Right? I think that's going to be a big
Fascinating.
key.
Is that, pardon my ignorance on this one, but like, what is, from a high level, what is operationalization? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So operationalization, I think about it in having three things, I would say. Firstly, understanding what the issue is. And that's for a developer versus a CISO, that could be very different, right? For a CISO, it could be, hey, like I broke a CIS compliance, right, across the board. For a developer, it could be, hey, my specific application, when I'm about to check in some code, is not non-compliant, right? So you have to speak to the language of the persona you're targeting. So that's a visibility portion. I would say the second is understanding like the reasoning, like the why, right?
Yeah.
And it varies between different attack surfaces. Like in the cloud and AWS, like AWS has done a great job of, the nice UI, showing the configurations, API first. Kubernetes is still, there are platforms, but it's still catching up, right? Things are written in code. It lives in GitHub. You have to read through a YAML file and understand, right? So evidence is key. And then having the right remediation guidelines where it's business tailored. Specifically, there some guidelines that are out there may work for you. Some you have to be very, very specific and custom tailor it to the applications you're running in your environment. So those are some of the challenges when it comes to operationalizing. One of the things we covered in that NSA blog was, how, for example, Uptycs enables you to do that, for your developer teams. But I think we'll also start to see more personalization along that front, right? For different development teams, Team Bronwyn versus Team Abhinav, who are in an organization, the rules may be different, right? And being able to satisfy that is going to be a big key.
Fascinating. Yeah. So do you think that sort of operationalizing in general will be something that people are focusing more on in the coming years? Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's my hypothesis.
Yeah.
I think what's happening right now is from a Kubernetes security, we're grabbing a lot of the telemetry, we're getting all the misconfigurations, kind of showing all the risks, and we're giving it to the SecOps teams. And I think the next piece, that once we have all the data, the next portion is going to on how to reduce like the stat MTTR, right? Mean time to resolution. How do we really start to chop that down in half and get that much faster, is I think is going to be the next focus.
Yeah, interesting. I have a question about something that I don't know if you know about, because I don't really know what it is, but I keep hearing and seeing the acronym eBPF in relation to Kubernetes and container security. Can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, for sure. So eBPF, it's a kernel technology, right? But kernel, it means it's running inside of the operating system. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to get deeper inspection, because with eBPF, it's actually able to go inside the kernel, inside the process, really gather a lot of the data, whether it's on different processes running, different network connections, all of that kind of stuff. But what's nice about eBPF, it's also very friendly to use. So you're like different structures before. It's like if you had to go inside the kernel, that means there was risk, right? Because now there with things like OS query and eBPF and everything, you can basically get all of that rich telemetry that's happening inside the operating system without having to actually affect the operating system. And it's exciting. You're seeing, Uptycs is a big adopter of eBPF for, container workload. We're able to see like, what packages are in use for a given vulnerability, so we can cut down the noise, or do things like Yara rule scanning, where we can say like, hey, like you have this process that's named something, but is it actually doing something different? And is that process malicious, right? And you're starting to see other companies, the deep fences and isovalence of the world adopt eBPF as well for, isovalent for Kubernetes networking, for example. And I think we're going to see a lot more spike in eBPF adoption.
Cool. I think I caught most of that.
Yeah.
Glitched out a little bit. That's awesome. One thing I'm excited to be, talking with you at this point is that KubeCon is in just a couple of weeks, really. So it's really good for me to have all of this preparatory knowledge. It's perfect timing for me. What's something you're looking forward to at KubeCon?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, excited to talk with prospects, and that's always something naturally in a company you're excited about. But I'm also excited to see all the innovation that's taking place. It's really interesting. Every KubeCon, there's a kind of a different theme. Last year it was, or this past KubeCon EU was very focused on WASM, the web application side of things, and really being able to dive deep there. I think this time you're going to see focus on Definitely security is always a big focus. I think platforms is really interesting. Platform engineering and how it's coming together. That was a big focus at my previous company as well. And what I'm excited about as well too is how these things come together when it comes, like for example, platform engineering and security, how teams are going to embrace that, how they're going to operationalize it with these developer self-service platforms. I think that's going to be like the next big wave, and I'm excited to see a lot of the innovation that comes out of it. So
Heck yeah, me too. Absolutely. One thing I always get excited about too is just meeting people and being there
yeah.
and making some good connections. Is there anyone that you are excited about seeing, or like a community you're excited about reconnecting with when you go?
Yeah, absolutely. So in CNCF, I was, there's a platforms working group, which, since at my previous company was very involved, it still keep in touch with the folks. So there are two, Abby Bangser and Josh Gavant, who are thought leaders in the platform space. Really excited, and Saim
Shout out.
Sattar, who's a CNCF ambassador. Really excited to see what they have to offer. There's some cons going on the WASM networking multi-tenancy con. There are different sort of these sub events where I'm very excited to see all the efforts going there. And then on the security front, definitely there's the tag security group where they're doing a lot of efforts. There's a new zero trust report that's coming out, so I'm excited to see all the work there as well.
Awesome. That's so great to hear. And maybe for the listeners who are catching us at the perfect time here, can you give us a quick like a sneak peek of what people might find out about Uptycs if they come to KubeCon and chat with us there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, super excited to really get into what we have to offer for Uptycs Kubernetes security. We have a lot of new offerings on the table. So one is image policy. So this is supply chain concept and being able to shift left. So supply chain security is one of the big things we're announcing. So now for a given image, we not only have the ability to do CI scans and registry scans and being able to enforce in runtime, but we can also map to what developer builds in GitHub. So for example, if a developer introduced a vulnerability, you can see which commits introduced it. And then also we're integrating with CIS benchmarks for supply chain security. So we can see, hey, if like my GitHub was insecure, like didn't have MFA enabled, then block the build because my supply chain was vulnerable at the time a developer was building something. So that's the whole supply chain security and image policies. There's also something in terms of the ecosystem, Kubernetes Goat, GOAT, it's like literally on their thing they show goats, but
Yes.
it's actually like a framework for catching some of the most prevalent threats, right? So container breakouts, port scanning, reverse shell, these are common Kubernetes security issues or container security issues. And what we've done with Uptycs and what we'll show at KubeCon is being able to map those attacks in real time as detections and then correlate that with misconfigurations on your Kubernetes cluster. So whether it's a excessive role that has permissions to everything when it shouldn't, or a certain network security, network policies that are misconfigured, being able to show that end-to-end story where we correlate the control plane and data plane, that's another big exciting thing we're going to be showing.
Love it. It's a holistic understanding of that whole process. That's really, really great. Kind of allows you to zoom out without losing focus of those details. That's awesome. Okay, so we're almost at our time. So I have to end on a more loosey-goosey question because I like to do it. And I think I want to ask you if you could use any superpower to improve cybersecurity, what superpower would you choose to have?
So when you say superpowered, can you give like an example?
So I think we have the full range available to us. I think we've got everything from like telepathy, telekinesis, all that kind of stuff. Could also be like maybe you can just become invisible and walk amongst the people that you need to spy on. I don't know. Like I think yeah, whatever you got really.
I would say the superpower would be being able to connect. I don't know. To me, it's like connect the dots almost, right? And I think that's the optic superpower as well. But I think like the ability to kind of like literally take two different things and say, hey, this is the insight I get is the one I would do, because that's where the real magic comes, right? There's APIs to collect all these kinds of telemetry, but correlating it is a pain. And then in the age of AI and big data, even a bigger pain because of all the data that we have. So I'd say I'd call it probably the insights, right? The insight would be the superpower.
That's so cool. I'd love it. I feel like you also have like, if we're building you into a superhero, which now sounds like a very fun project, you could have this ability to like, sort of what's that story with the guy with the crayon who can connect things and like draw lines in the air? You can be connecting the dots and pulling information. Mr. Insight. I don't know. Insight man. That's
I
cool.
imagine just like I see two things and then just go like this and then boom, that's your like yeah.
And you blast off with the
uh,
speed of light. Yeah, yeah, cool.
yeah, I think that's like that would be a nice superpower to have for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, heck yeah. I love it. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining this episode. I feel like it's great timing going into KubeCon. We're going to have a lot of things to talk about at that conference, but also right after. We've got so many features to be able to share with folks. So it's really great to get your insights and also see how you kind of came up in this industry.
Yeah, and definitely check out our Mastering Kubernetes Security blog posts. Yeah, we'll be at the booth and we're excited to see everybody at KubeCon. So
Yeah,
thank you so much.
absolutely. Thank you so much. We'll drop all those links in the show notes. And just in case people want to find you, Abhinav, where can they find you on the internet?
Yes, they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also available on the CNCF Slack. So that's like, just open anytime. Feel free to reach out and yeah, or otherwise, yeah, those are the two big things. So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you out in cyberspace.
Thanks. Thanks so much.